Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about a habit that's quietly sabotaging your potential, and most people don't even realize they're doing it. Emotional dumping. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That constant cycle of offloading your problems, venting your frustrations, sharing every single inconvenience in your life with anyone who'll listen. It might feel like relief in the moment, but the truth, it's draining your power. Every time you do it, you're giving away control of your emotional state. You're feeding your own helplessness instead of reclaiming your strength. Here's the deal. Your brain is like a GPS. It listens to whatever you tell it the most. If you keep repeating your problems, how overwhelmed you are, how unfair life is, how stuck you feel, it doesn't just hear you, it believes you. And then it starts filtering your world through that lens. Your thoughts begin to loop, your emotions spiral, and before you know it, your identity becomes wrapped around your problem, not your goals, not your potential, not your power, just your problems. Now, let's be clear. I'm not saying you should bottle things up and pretend everything's fine. That's not healthy either. I'm saying you need to be intentional. Are you talking about your problems to process and solve them? Or are you just dumping them because it gives you a hit of sympathy? Because if it's the second one, it's time to get honest with yourself. That moment of validation might feel good for 5 minutes, but what happens after that? Nothing. You're still stuck. You've wasted energy telling a story instead of rewriting it. Emotional dumping is like playing the same sad song on repeat and expecting your life to suddenly start dancing to a different beat. It doesn't work that way. You're not moving forward. You're rehearsing your pain. And the more you rehearse it, the better you get at staying exactly where you are. That's not what you want. That's not why you're here. You are not meant to live in a cycle of constant complaining and venting. You are meant to grow, to rise, to lead yourself out of whatever darkness you're in. You know what real strength looks like? It's not in how loudly you talk about your problems. It's in how quietly you get to work on them. You don't have to post about your struggle every day. You don't have to call 5 friends and relive the worst parts of your day over and over. What you have to do is ask yourself, what's the next small action I can take to shift this? Because that's what pulls you out of emotional chaos. Not more talking, not more venting, but action. Every time you emotionally dump, you're reinforcing the belief that you can't handle your life unless someone else saves you, and that is a lie. You don't need saving. You need strategy. You need movement. You need to remember that the most powerful person in your life isn't your friend, your therapist, your mom. It's you. So if you want to feel better, start by thinking better. Stop rehashing every single problem and start building a new pattern. One that says, I acknowledge the problem and now I focus on the solution. That tiny shift in mindset will change your entire trajectory. Look, life is hard. We all have things we're dealing with. But the people who grow, the people who build lives they're proud of, are the ones who stop handing out their problems like candy and start treating their time and energy like gold. Because they know every time you talk about what's going wrong without working on what could go right, you're moving backwards. So here's your challenge. The next time you catch yourself spiraling into a rant or unloading your stress just to feel heard, pause. Ask yourself, is this helping me move forward? If the answer is no, redirect. Even a tiny step forward is more powerful than 1,000 words about what's not working. Own your story, but more importantly, own how it ends. And that starts with you taking your power back from emotional dumping and putting it where it belongs, in focused, courageous, solution-driven action. Most people walk around thinking their problems are unique. that the weight they're carrying is heavier than anyone else's. And while your pain is valid, while your stress is real, so is everyone else's. People have their own problems. That's the part no one likes to admit. You're out here expecting someone to really care, to really sit with your issues and feel what you're feeling, but they're too busy carrying their own baggage. That's not cold, it's just human nature. We live in a world where everyone is overwhelmed. Everyone has something on their plate, pressure from work, bills piling up, a relationship hanging by a thread, kids, parents, deadlines, regrets. And yet, we expect people to stop what they're doing, step out of their mess, and pour themselves into ours. When you start to understand this, you begin to realize why so many conversations feel shallow, why your rants often get short replies, or why people drift away when you consistently unload on them. It's not because they don't like you. It's because they're already trying to survive their own chaos. Here's what happens. The more you expect others to carry your emotional load, the more disappointed you feel when they don't. You feel ignored, misunderstood, even betrayed. But the problem isn't them, it's the expectation. When you walk into every connection with the unconscious hope that someone else will make your pain feel smaller, you're setting yourself up to feel abandoned. You're chasing comfort in the wrong place. Because let's face it, people can sympathize, but they can't fix it for you. They don't live in your mind. They don't feel what you feel. They're not going to drop everything just because your world is shaking. And even if someone does listen, even if they give you their time and attention, you have to understand this. Nobody will ever care about your life as much as you do. They can support you, they can encourage you, but the responsibility to heal, to grow, to move, that's on you. It always has been. This realization isn't meant to isolate you, it's meant to wake you up. You need to stop putting your emotional well-being in other people's hands. You need to stop looking for someone to always understand because they won't, and they don't have to. That's not their job. Your job is to understand yourself, to sit with your own pain, to process your own thoughts, to stand up even when it's hard, and decide that no matter how messy things are, you're the one who has to clean it up. When you stop expecting others to solve your problems or hold space for every breakdown, you free them, but more importantly, you free yourself. You stop being dependent. You stop waiting. You stop handing over your peace to people who never asked to be responsible for it in the first place. Let's be real. People want results, not repetition. They want to see you rise, not relive your struggle every single week. If all you do is talk about what's wrong, you become emotionally exhausting to be around, not because you're not lovable or worthy, but because you're stuck. And no one can push you out of stuckness but you. So the next time you feel like dumping your problems into someone else's lap, pause and ask yourself, what am I really hoping to get from this? If the answer is attention, validation, or sympathy, it's time to shift. What you truly need isn't someone to feel sorry for you. It's someone to challenge you to step up. And often that person has to be you. There is nothing wrong with needing help. But don't confuse needing support with needing saving. There's a big difference. Help is a hand to guide you while you walk. Saving is expecting someone else to carry you. The truth is, nobody's coming to save you. And that's okay, because you are more capable than you give yourself credit for. Once you understand that everyone's dealing with something and that no one is obligated to carry your load, you start to become emotionally self-sufficient. You learn how to sit with discomfort. You learn how to work through your own storms. And you stop resenting others for not being what you needed them to be. That's freedom. That's growth. That's power. And it's all waiting for you to stop expecting, start owning, and rise. There's a huge misconception that talking about your problems is the same as doing something about them. It's not. Venting and solving are two completely different things, and too many people get stuck in the habit of mistaking one for the other. You can talk about how overwhelmed you are, you can cry to your best friend, complain to your coworkers, or post a long rant on social media. But none of that is movement. None of it is progress. It feels good in the moment, sure. You get that emotional release, that hit of validation when someone agrees with you or says, yeah, that sucks. But when the conversation ends, what's different? Absolutely nothing. You're still in the same situation. You still haven't made a decision. You haven't taken a step forward. And worst of all, you've probably drained the energy you could have used to do something real. Venting is emotional fast food. It gives you a quick sense of satisfaction, but it doesn't actually nourish or empower you. And if you do it too often, it becomes a cycle that's hard to break. You start going to people not to grow, but to release pressure. You end up managing stress instead of managing solutions. It's easy to fall into this trap because venting feels like doing something. You're engaging, you're expressing, you're connecting. But what you're not doing is fixing anything. You're not building resilience. You're not learning skills. And you're definitely not taking action. The harsh truth is, if you're not moving toward a solution, you're just repeating the problem over and over. And the more you repeat it, the more real it becomes in your mind. The bigger it feels, the harder it seems to overcome. When you train yourself to constantly verbalize your frustration without pairing it with action, you create a pattern in your brain that says, talking is the goal, but it's not. The goal is change. The goal is progress. And that doesn't come from repeating what's wrong. It comes from asking, what now? That question is powerful. It shifts your mind from problem-centered to solution-focused. It stops the spiral and forces clarity. Now, does this mean you should never talk about what you're going through? Of course not. We all need space to process and feel. But there's a difference between processing and rehearsing. Processing is temporary. It's the act of getting clear on what's happening so you can figure out what to do next. Rehearsing, on the other hand, is when you go over the same problem again and again, hoping the story itself will bring relief. It won't. If you really want to change your life, you have to interrupt the pattern. You have to stop telling the same story and start creating a new one. That means being intentional about when you speak and why. Before you vent, pause. Ask yourself, am I saying this to move forward, or am I just trying to feel better temporarily? If it's the second one, take a breath and choose a better path. Write it down in a journal. Go for a walk. Sit with the discomfort, but don't keep pouring your energy into empty conversations that go nowhere. The truth is, you are capable of solving way more than you think, but you'll never access that power if you're always looking outward for relief. Real growth begins when you start turning inward and asking yourself hard questions. What can I control? What's one small thing I can do right now to make this better? Who can help me? Not just listen, but help me build a plan. That's where your energy needs to go. Not into rants, not into venting loops, but into strategy and movement. And let's be honest, venting doesn't even make you feel that much better in the long run. It often leaves you feeling more tired, more frustrated, and more helpless. Why? Because you're reliving the problem without resolution. You're stirring up emotions without channeling them into anything productive. That's emotional burnout disguised as emotional expression. So the next time you feel like unloading, pause. Ask yourself if you want to feel better for 5 minutes or change your life for good. If the answer is real change, then stop talking and start doing. Solutions don't come from your mouth. They come from your mindset and the action you're brave enough to take. Every time you open your mouth to talk about how unfair life is or how hard things have been, you're doing more than just sharing your story. You're teaching people how to see you. You're teaching them how to treat you. Whether you realize it or not, the way you present yourself in conversations becomes the lens through which others view you. If all you ever talk about is how overwhelmed you are, how nothing ever works out for you, how people always disappoint you, guess what? People start to believe that version of you, not because they want to judge you, but because you've trained them to. Words have power. Repetition creates identity. If you keep telling everyone that you're struggling, eventually even you forget that you're capable of thriving. You're building a brand around being the victim, the one who can't catch a break, the one who always has a problem. And that becomes dangerous. Because once you lock yourself into that identity, it's hard to break free. Not just in other people's minds, but in your own. People respond to how you show up. If you consistently come across as someone who's lost, broken, or powerless, they will unconsciously treat you that way. They'll stop challenging you. They won't offer opportunities. They won't bring you solutions. They'll pity you, or worse, avoid you altogether. Because nobody wants to be around someone who constantly drains the energy from the room. Not because you're a bad person, but because emotional heaviness without action is exhausting. You become someone they have to manage instead of someone they admire. You have to ask yourself, what message am I sending with the way I speak about myself and my life? Are you reinforcing strength or helplessness? Are you showing people your power or constantly highlighting your pain? Now, pain is part of life. We all go through seasons that are difficult. But the key is how you communicate that pain. Are you speaking from a place of growth and responsibility, or are you stuck in the loop of blame and hopelessness? Because when you start to show up as someone who owns their story, someone who acknowledges the challenge but is focused on rising from it, everything changes. People listen differently. They respect you more. They start to see you as someone who is resilient, who is navigating the storm, not someone who's waiting to be rescued from it. That subtle shift in energy, it's everything. It changes how you feel about yourself and how the world interacts with you. You don't get respect by complaining, you get respect by rising. You get respect by showing that no matter how tough things get, you're the kind of person who keeps moving forward. And when you speak from that place, when your words reflect your strength, even in hard times, people respond to that. They start treating you like someone who is strong, someone who is capable, someone who is going somewhere. It's about taking control of your narrative. You can either let your circumstances define you, or you can define yourself in spite of them. That means being mindful of your language. It means choosing not to lead with weakness, but with growth. It means refusing to let your problems become your personality. Ask yourself, if someone met you for the first time today and only had your words to go off of, what would they think about you? Would they see someone who's beaten down by life or someone who's building themselves back up? Would they see a victim of circumstances or a person of character and strength? Because people can only reflect back what you give them. You want to be seen as powerful? Start talking like someone who's reclaiming their power. And this isn't about pretending everything is okay. It's not about being fake or hiding your struggle. It's about showing up in a way that honors your journey without getting stuck in it. It's about speaking with intention and purpose. When you do that, when you start to own your role as the author of your life, people will stop treating you like a side character and start treating you like the main character you are. The way you speak about yourself matters. So stop telling the story of your weakness and start living the story of your rise. There's something incredibly powerful about learning to sit with your pain without always needing to talk about it. It doesn't mean you're ignoring what you feel. It doesn't mean you're suppressing your emotions. It means you're giving yourself space to understand what's really going on without immediately reaching for someone else to carry it for you. That kind of self-awareness, that inner resilience, is what separates the people who stay stuck from the ones who rise. We live in a world that encourages oversharing. Post your breakdown, share your struggles, tell everyone what you're going through. But what if you didn't? What if instead of running to vent every time something went wrong, you got quiet and started listening to yourself? Because here's the truth. Clarity comes from stillness, not noise. When you're constantly talking about what's wrong, you're in reaction mode. You're just offloading. But when you sit with it, when you really allow yourself to feel it without distraction, you start to uncover what it's trying to teach you. Pain is a messenger. It's not just there to torture you or weigh you down. It's trying to point to something that needs your attention. Maybe it's a boundary you've been ignoring. Maybe it's a change you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a truth you've been too scared to face. But you can't hear that message if you're constantly talking over it. The people who grow are the ones who learn how to sit in the discomfort and ask themselves, what is this trying to show me? But you don't need an audience for every emotion. Not everything needs to be processed out loud. Some of the most profound breakthroughs happen in silence. In those moments where you stop trying to explain your pain and start learning from it. Because the minute you shift from reaction to reflection, you move from powerless to powerful. You stop being the victim of your circumstances and start becoming the student of your experience. Now, let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with talking. There's value in reaching out when you genuinely need support or perspective. But that's not the same as using conversation to avoid doing the real work. Emotional growth isn't loud. It doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like sitting on your bed, breathing through the urge to text someone about your frustration and just letting the feeling rise and pass. That's self-leadership. That's maturity. The reason sitting with your emotions feels so hard is because we're conditioned to escape discomfort. We reach for distraction, validation, attention. We want to feel better now. But real strength is built in the waiting, in the willingness to let it hurt, to not have the answers yet and still hold space for yourself without trying to dump that burden onto someone else. That's when your mind gets stronger. That's when your emotional intelligence grows. You begin to realize that most of what you were rushing to talk about didn't need to be talked about at all. It just needed time, space, patience. You learn to distinguish between pain that needs expression and pain that just needs silence to heal. You become more selective with your words, more intentional with your energy. And that shift, it changes everything. Suddenly you're not that person who vents all the time. You're the person who thinks before they speak. The one who processes internally, who shows up to conversations with insight instead of chaos. People start to respect your presence more because you're not just reacting, you're grounded. You become someone others look to, not just someone they listen to out of obligation. And the best part, you stop feeling like a victim of your emotions. You start feeling like the one in charge. You still feel pain, yes. You still have hard days, but you're not at the mercy of those emotions anymore. You've built an inner anchor, a foundation that isn't dependent on other people's reactions or support. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, instead of rushing to speak, try sitting with it. Breathe, listen, ask yourself, what's this really about? And trust that you are strong enough to handle what comes up. You don't need to say it all. You just need to hear yourself. That's where the healing begins. That's where the transformation starts. And that's how you start leading yourself through anything life throws your way. People are naturally drawn to energy, not the loudest voice in the room, not the most dramatic story, but energy, that grounded, focused, forward-moving energy that signals someone is going somewhere. Think about the kind of person you're naturally attracted to. They're not constantly complaining. They're not telling the same sad story over and over. They're the ones who show up with a sense of direction, who are building something, who radiate purpose, even if they're not there yet. And the secret is, That kind of energy doesn't come from a perfect life. It comes from ownership. When you take ownership of your problems instead of broadcasting them, people start seeing you differently. You become magnetic, not because everything is great, but because you're clearly in control of your mindset. You're not defined by what's happened to you, you're defined by what you're doing about it, and that is rare. That kind of personal responsibility is powerful. It sends a message without you even having to say a word. I've got this. And that's what people trust. That's what people respect. When you stop talking about your problems all the time, you conserve your energy, you keep your power close to you. And instead of wasting it trying to get people to understand or sympathize, you put that energy into taking action, into solving, into building, into healing. And that's when your presence starts to change. You walk into a room and people feel that strength. They don't know your whole story, and they don't need to, because the way you carry yourself says enough. You're not just surviving, you're doing something about it. Let's get something straight. Confidence isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's about knowing that no matter what you're going through, you're capable of getting through it. And when that confidence shows up in your body language, in your decisions, in your silence even, it speaks volumes. It's not about being fake. It's about being intentional. You're not hiding your struggles. You're choosing to deal with them in a way that doesn't drain you or the people around you. This is where maturity comes in. Immature energy wants constant attention and validation. It needs everyone to know how hard life is so it can feel seen. But mature energy understands that not everyone needs access to your journey, that healing can happen privately, that some breakthroughs are more powerful when they're quiet. You don't need to explain every step. You just need to keep taking them. And people notice. Opportunities start to come your way, not because you begged for them, but because your energy says, I'm ready. Relationships become healthier because you're no longer showing up as someone who needs to be saved. You show up as a whole person, capable of navigating your own path. That's attractive. That's empowering. There's also a shift in how you view yourself when you stop talking about your problems constantly. You stop identifying with them so deeply. You stop reinforcing the narrative that you're broken or stuck. Instead, you start reinforcing the narrative that you're learning, growing, and moving forward. And over time, that becomes your truth. You're no longer someone with a long list of struggles. You're someone with a track record of rising. Think about how much time you've spent explaining yourself, justifying your pain, trying to make people see what you're going through. What if you redirected that time into building something better for yourself? What if you used it to create routines that support your healing or to pursue goals that remind you of your strength? That energy shift changes your life. It takes you from passive to powerful. You don't need everyone to know your story. You need to live it in a way that speaks for itself. Let your growth do the talking. Let your actions make the statement. Let your results be the proof. That's how you build credibility. That's how you earn trust. That's how you create impact without saying a word. People can feel when you've done the work. They can feel when you're not looking for pity, but standing in purpose. That's the kind of energy that moves the needle. That's the kind of energy that changes your life. So stop explaining, stop venting, stop trying to get people to care. Channel that energy inward. Build yourself. Back yourself, and let your presence say everything that words never could. Most people don't want to admit this, but the more you keep talking about your problems, the more power you give them. It's not just about what you're saying out loud, it's about what your brain hears on repeat. Every time you tell that same story of how things didn't work out, how someone let you down, how life keeps kicking you when you're already down, your mind registers it as a confirmation. This is who I am. This is my life. It isn't, you may think you're just venting, but your subconscious is listening. And over time, it starts to shape your beliefs. You go from having a problem to being the problem. That's how an experience turns into an identity. This is where people get stuck. They start to believe the narrative they've told themselves and others 100 times. That's when things get dangerous. Because now you're not just struggling with something, you're carrying it like it defines you. And the longer you live in that space, the harder it becomes to break free from it. The more you say, I can't, I'm always this way, people always do this to me, the more those words become rooted in who you are. You become attached to the version of yourself that's hurt, stuck, or powerless, even if you don't want to be. If you really want to reclaim your life, it starts with understanding this. Your problems are real, but they are not your identity. They are events, situations, temporary experiences. They are not who you are. But if you keep repeating them over and over, out loud and in your head, they harden into yourself and mute. That's why silence is sometimes more powerful than speaking, because when you stop repeating the same story, you give yourself space to create a new one. This doesn't mean ignoring your pain or pretending everything is fine. It means learning to separate the event from the identity. You can say, that happened to me, without saying, that's who I am. You can feel disappointment without becoming a disappointed person. You can go through failure without becoming a failure. That distinction is everything. The real shift happens when you stop identifying with what's broken and start identifying with what's possible. That's where your energy needs to live, not in repeating the past, but in creating the future. The moment you shift your focus from what happened to what's next is the moment you start getting your power back. That's the point where growth begins. One of the biggest lies we tell ourselves is that talking about something makes us feel better. Sometimes, yes, expression is healthy. But too often we use repetition as a crutch. We keep telling the story because we think someone else's understanding will heal us. It won't. What heals you is the decision to move forward. What heals you is showing up for yourself differently. What heals you is breaking the habit of telling the same painful story like a script you've memorized. You have to understand your brain is always listening. It believes whatever you tell it. So if you want your life to change, you need to change the way you speak about your life. That includes the words you say to yourself when no one's listening, especially those. You can't plant seeds of growth and keep watering them with words of defeat. You can't want to rise while speaking from a place of staying down. Start telling yourself something different. Start saying, I'm figuring it out. Start saying, I'm healing. Start saying, I don't have all the answers, but I'm moving forward anyway. Those aren't just affirmations. They're directions for your life. They're shifts in identity. And when you start speaking from that place, even if it feels uncomfortable at first, your brain starts to follow. Your energy shifts. Your decisions shift. Your habits shift. And slowly but surely, your life begins to reflect that new story. The most powerful story you'll ever tell is the one you tell yourself. So stop rehearsing the version that keeps you small. Stop identifying with your pain. Feel it, learn from it, but then let it go. Choose to create a new narrative, one where you're not the victim, but the victor, one where your past isn't your prison, but your platform. That's how you take your power back, not by telling the world what hurt you, but by showing the world what you've built from it.